Hello, everyone. Welcome to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at Dante Audio, an IP-based audio protocol that really has, taken over as the de facto standard for digital audio in AV and production environments. But before we get there, as I always do, I just want to remind everybody that we will be taking video call in for the show. So if you have a question, want to make a comment or share a thought, we'd love to have you connect with us. There should be a link right at the top of the show description under the video you're watching here, or you can just connect to the URL at the lower third and get on. Somebody from the studio will bring you on, and we'd love to have you live with us. That said, we also love any types of comments, questions, anything you want to share. Just say hello. We love to connect with all of you, and we really appreciate you joining us for the show. So, to get started, I wanted to talk just a little bit in general about Dante Audio, give you a sense of what it does, how it integrates as separate components in an AV environment. And then we're going to take a look at some actual software and use cases that Dante could be applied to in your productions. So I'm going to start off by answering the question, what is Dante Audio? And at its baseline, it's IP-based audio. And what makes this very exciting is that it's IP-based audio that runs on standard networks. So let me qualify that as we come into this. If you look up the documentation, they talk about the ability to use 100 meg networks with different types of packet prioritization. I would just recommend, if there's any way possible, just put this on a 1 gigabit network. It can be the same studio network you use for IP video, but you just need to be aware that the traffic on there, it leaves plenty of headroom for adding IP-based audio as well. The other thing that's really great about Dante as a protocol is that it is uncompressed. As an uncompressed source, you get pristine audio coming through. You don't have any issue from what came in to what is going out to listeners either in a venue or as a viewing audience on a remote stream. So that's great. The other piece is that typically you'll find Dante built into different types of hardware products that are out in the market. Everything from speakers to wireless systems to mixers. I mean, we're using a Dante-based mixer here from Ashley, a Digimix 24, which is phenomenal. But the other thing that Audinate, who is the developer behind Dante, they've actually made it available through software as well. So they have a couple of different programs that allow you to Dante enable other software programs you may be using. And that includes what we use here with the TriCaster, as well as vMix. These things can become sources that can now integrate Dante into those production systems and lots of other software as well. So if we look at how Dante is set up, where I really mentioned in the beginning is it really connects all at a switch. This is very, very similar to what we talked about with Nutec's NDI protocol. It requires a 1 gigabit switch. The difference here, of course, is that you can pump a lot more audio in 1 gigabit of bandwidth than you can you can video. And also, as we mentioned before, the audio itself is not compressed, unlike NDI video. But the way that Audinate and the Dante protocol views the connections that take place is different from the way NDI does. In the Dante world, there are things they call transmitters. That's any source of audio. So obviously that would be things like microphones here and stage mics, but it could also be audio that's playing on a computer system you may have. If you want to do things at intermissions or anything that requires external audio sources, you can integrate those as well. They all become transmitters in the Dante lingo. And corresponding to that, you also have receivers. So that could be speakers like IFBs, like I'm using here, anything that would take and process the audio. One of the other things, that doesn't really fit neatly into either of these categories because it really spans both, is something like a switching system, where it is both a receiver, it's taking in audio feeds from all the microphones, and it could have DDR playback for video and the rest. That's all coming in as received Dante audio if you're using Dante, but it's also a transmitter. So if you're sending the audio that comes out of the production switcher to a downstream encoder, or you're sending it out because you're switching a live event and you're sending it out to monitors that may be in a facility, an overflow room in a church, things like that. You'd also be using it now to transmit audio. So it has that hybrid role. And probably the most interesting hybrid role would be something that, like a mixer, and in our case, this is the mixer we use, that is both a receiver and a transmitter, because you do that in a mixer, but also something that in the Dante world is called a clock, a master clock. One of the big benefits that Dante brings to the audio space is that every source of audio is clocked. It has a timestamp effectively, so that when a receiver, one of the receivers for that audio, gets it in, it can, after a certain latency, play it back. And this means that every device, because they all share a common clock, every device will play that same audio back at the same time. Everything in a Dante universe can stay in sync, managed by a single clock that sort of rules the entire timing for the network. Really valuable, and something that in an video plus audio network, that is incredibly valuable. You deal with sync issues all the time in audio video, and this gives you just one more layer of control over how that audio is being distributed. And then if you need to make an adjustment, it's a common adjustment for everything. So if the video is a little out of sync, if you adjust all the audio timing in common, you can compensate for that and keep everything, lined up the way people that would be watching would expect it to be. So this gives you sort of the overall sense. Compared to analog, it's the same advantages we have here with the move to IP. There is one cable from each device connected to the switch, and all those devices, all the channels of audio talk over that one cable. So it simplifies things dramatically. If you want to bring in multiple devices to a mixer, there's still just one cable, one Cat6 cable going to that mixer, and everything comes with that. For anybody that has done analog audio and hauled big, heavy snakes around to the front of house and back to a console, you'll appreciate what that one cable actually means, especially if you get to my age and you sort of know what it's like to carry that weight around. So let me take the next step here and jump into how all of these things actually get connected in a network. So let me jump out of PowerPoint here. And what I'm going to look at now is something, it's a software application that Dante provides called Dante Controller. Now, Dante Controller, let me just sort of shrink this down for a second so we can see this. What Dante Controller lets you do is map audio coming from your transmitters to different inputs on your receivers. So if you look across the top here, these are all the devices that are available on the network here in the studio that can transmit audio. So if I expand that, you'll see the first thing here is our Dante mixer. So these are all the sources that we have, and we have a whole set of aux feeds that we set up with different audio mixes that are now being fed out as Dante signals. The next is the TC1. So this is the switcher, the TriCaster that we're using. And we have two aux outputs, two stereo pairs, an aux feed, which is everything that would be sent out that effectively is what return guests would be hearing if we're sending something mixed back to anybody that could be joining us remotely. So we use that as one feed, and it's also a feed that could be used to stream out as we set up the mixes for this. The other thing here we have, this is another MacBook Pro that's on the network. So again, you can actually have computers integrate with physical devices. So we looked at the TriCaster and we looked at a mixer. We also can have computers here. The live to air system, that's the system that we will take remote callers or when we do video guests coming in. That's the system we use for that. And you can see here we have 4 stereo pairs coming in with remote guest audio and another stereo pair, which is actually the audio of all those 4 guests combined. So there may be cases where if we had multiple guests or guests and callers, we'd want to just take one feed and use that to share audio with everybody. The other thing we have over here is the microphone in. So this is actually coming off of a Shure wireless device, and we're feeding that in via Dante. And we'll talk a little bit later about exactly how we do that. On the receiver side, if I expand this here, so now again, we have lots of inputs that are available on the mixer. So that's the first device that we have up here. So we have all the live to air guests that are coming in. So those are our remote guests or callers. We have the program out that is being fed from the mixer. Fed to the TriCaster from the mixer. So this would be, the program that we receive there. We have the microphones for both myself, and if we had another in-studio guest, you'd have that. We also have, this is the return audio that we'd send out, the audio that we send out to the TriCaster directly. So this is that's what's being received here. Again, we have a computer system here that's also involved. Now, the Studio IFB is the in-ear microphone, the in-ear headset that I have, so I could hear remote guests, hear video that may be playing on the TriCaster, and hear any input from anybody in the control room telling me to look at something or to stop doing something. So that's all over Dante. And then again, we have the Studio Live to Air system. We need to create a special mix minus feed, which we talked about a few episodes ago about audio and mix minus, that remote guest would receive. But if I look at this now, what I actually have laid out is a matrix of potential connections. So anytime I want to assign let me just show this here. If I want to assign a specific audio transmitter to an audio receiver, all I need to do is go in and select the output from the transmitter here, line it up with the input for the receiver, and I just click a box. And when that connection's made, you'll see that green arrow coming, the green check mark coming. And that lets you know that I've effectively patched those two connections together. What makes this really exciting, though, is that it's not in a tradition, as you'd have in a traditional audio patch system, it's not a one-to-one patching. So if I wanted to send this same audio source to multiple devices, I wanted to send it to my mixer, I wanted to send it to the TriCaster, I wanted to send it to maybe monitors that I'd have located in the front of a venue, I can take that one transmitter in Dante speak and assign it to multiple receivers. So it means that in setting these types of configurations up, I can do many to one, or actually one to many, in terms of transmitters to receivers. And it saves me enormously in cabling that I would have to do. So if I wanted to take a feed from a sort of a stage audio, and I wanted to send that to monitors that I may have in my control room, as well as front of house monitors, as well as maybe an overflow room. If, say, this were a church at a service, a special service, you could feed the same one audio source to multiple locations without having to do any new rewiring, or in fact, without having to change any other setup that you may have had already in place for, say, your normal Sunday services compared to a special service. This configuration in Dante Controller can be taken as a snapshot and recalled. So if I want to set something up and remember that entire configuration with all the inputs mapped to all the outputs, I have the ability to do that in Dante Controller. This means that for different types of events or for different types of venues that you be operating in, you don't have to do a manual configuration each time. Now, to contrast this to what we talked about with NDI in the past, NDI has the same basic philosophy where I can publish a single video source and have multiple subscribers to that source somewhere else on the network. The big difference is that with NDI, you have to make those connections, those configurations at the edge points. So if I want to send one video to multiple monitors in a venue, I have to go to each of those monitors or the converter that's driving those monitors and subscribe to that video source at each location. Here, I have the ability to make all of those pairings centrally. Now, there are reasons, for both. So it's not that one is better than the other, but they have a substantial difference in the approach to making those types of connections. And it's something to keep in mind as we talk through how Dante operates, and in the future as we look more deeply into NDI. The other thing you'll notice up here is that it shows the master clock. When I mentioned Dante in the beginning, I talked about the importance of that clock for synchronizing audio across an infrastructure. In Dante, you have multiple devices that can be the clock for the system. And what's very interesting is Dante itself, as a protocol, as a network-based protocol, will what they call elect the clock that is best suited to maintain time. So in our case, this is the mixer that we're using here, which has built-in hardware Dante components and would provide the most stable clock that of all the things that are available on our network. But I could also run a software application that Audinate makes that would allow us to provide a software-based clock. And there are other sort of lower end hardware devices that can also provide a clock. Dante will see all of those and it will make a decision which one to pick based on, sort of quality of clock that can be provided. And if one goes down in the middle of a production, it can automatically switch to a different clock without sort of losing a beat, as they say. Everything will maintain sync through that entire master clock election process that takes place all behind the scenes. Very, very important, and something that in Controller you can dig a lot more deeply into. I won't go into all of it here, but I thought it's important to understand that Controller really is about the entire network itself, all the connections as well as the synchronization. So the next thing I want to talk about, I'm just going to talk about it briefly, is something that Audinate makes called Dante Virtual Soundcard. So let me open this up here. Okay, so Dante, when I mentioned in the beginning, Dante comes in hardware flavors, like in our mixer, as well as software flavors. Dante Virtual Soundcard is one of those software flavors of Dante. And what it will do is it will introduce what would effectively be an audio card, but a virtual one that has Dante inputs and Dante outputs. So this is the sort of startup signal for this, the startup panel for this. And it gives me, all the licensing information, clocking, what domains, some networking features. But this is really the main panel for what we want to talk about. It allows the software to operate in either what's called WDM or Windows Device Model interface devices, which would mean that all the Dante transmitters and receivers advertised by Dante Virtual Soundcard would operate just like a standard USB headset, microphone, or USB speaker that you would plug into a system. You don't need to install drivers, nothing special. When you plug it in, the sort of plug and play model takes effect and they just become available. That's what WDM allows you to do with Virtual Soundcard. But the other thing, and for professional applications, this can be really valuable, is it also has ASIO. The ASIO protocol is what's typically used. Now, if you look here on the set, I have sitting over here a audio interface. Most audio interfaces, if you're going to be working with things like Pro Tools or on a Mac, if you're going to work with Logic, they would be looking for ASIO devices. ASIO allows you to input a lot more channels. So with ASIO, I could have up to 64 inputs and outputs, all Dante based, coming in and out of the device. Whereas Windows Device Model, if I switch back to that, really is limited to 16 in, 16 out. So that would be sort of 8 stereo pairs in each direction. So this now gives you different ways to leverage software on your systems that is never really envisioned being a Dante based application, but now it becomes one. And that requires sort of nothing special on the part of the manufacturers or the software developers. You just get it because it looks like a standard device interface that Windows would have. So I can't really start this up because that could interfere with other stuff we have going on here, but I just wanted to make sure you're aware of this. This is something that we've installed in some big professional installations we've done, and it really is key to bridging the traditional software model with the Dante audio routing system. So the other piece, though, that allows you to integrate computer elements, also made by Audinate, is something called Dante VIA. So let me pop this up, give you a sort of an overview. Dante VIA is an application that will look at all the physical devices on your computer, all the software devices, things like if you see down here, Google Chrome, where if I went into YouTube and played audio, and played a video, there'd be audio there. It allows me now to start to map all of these things into the Dante universe. So if you look on this side, these are all the sources of audio. And on this side, these are all potential destinations. So things like the monitors we have here, things like the Behringer UM404, which is a very common device for a lot of streamers. It sees all these devices now. So on one level, I have sort of a map of physical and software devices, and I can now, at the next level, simply say, I want to make those devices Dante enabled. So now if you see what I've just done here, let me go through this. What I've done now is I've taken this Behringer device here that has 4 inputs and 4 outputs. I've taken it and I've Dante enabled it. So now the 4 inputs here can all be routed as Dante outputs. So on my Dante network right now, let me jump in here and we'll do this live. So if I come in here and go back into Dante Controller, you will see I have over here all the sources that I set up as transmitters. If you remember, I clicked on Google Chrome and I clicked on the Behringer. Those sources are now being advertised on my Dante network. So if I had a microphone and I plug that into here, that microphone now is Dante enabled. Any speaker in any other location that's Dante connected could now have the audio from that microphone routed to it. So it takes what was a standard Windows based audio interface and has created a Dante enabled interface. Because the other piece you'll notice, if I scroll down here, is that I also have the outputs. So if I had things connected on the output of this Behringer device, those would also now, uh, uh, I could route any Dante audio into that. So let me, over here, if we take a look over here, what I have is I have this cable going to a powered speaker. And what I'm going to show you is that I plug this in here in the back. So now I am effectively plugging this into a powered speaker. But if I come here now to the Dante controller, let me try to move this around. And, oh, see, there we go. So I'll put VIA over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up. And so this is a site from somebody that we actually have new theme music that's going to be coming for the show. Martin Mahoney Music. They've been working with us to get that together. So I'm just going to play some music from there. And what you'll see happen now, since I am routing in here, let me slide this over. So if I come over here, I have Chrome coming out here. That's a transmitter. And what I've done is I'm sending it now to the output of the Behringer here. So the left and right outputs 1 and 2. So when I play, let's just jump in here and we'll play some music. If this works here. So if you can hear that playing, this is music now that we've routed over Dante to this audio device. And the other thing, which again, because this is one of the things we talked about, I also routed that to inputs on the TriCaster. So this is something now we would be able to stream. So this gives you a perfect example of wanting to take audio that was coming off of a browser and having the ability to send it to speakers, which could be something you would have in if you were doing this in a venue, but at the same time now sending that audio into your switcher to stream out to a remote audience. So really a very, very powerful way to manage audio, even for simple things, because it just brings down the complexity level dramatically for what you need to do to manage and patch audio in a complex production environment. So, what we've seen here with that is, this is the sort of the software side of what Audinate's Dante provides. But they also provide something else that I think is really interesting, and it's something everybody should be aware of. Audinate has created a line of devices called AVIO devices, and they have all different ones. So if we have a sort of a closer shot of this, if possible, from these as AVIO devices, can we zoom in? Like go to a tighter one on 4 or something? Okay, this would be good. So on here, this device has on this side an Ethernet jack that connects it to a Dante network, and on this side it will have whatever device interface you want to use. So in this case, this would allow me to take this small device as a dongle, plug it into a laptop or a computer system, and have a stereo pair of Dante audio coming out of the system. Really, really powerful. But this isn't the only devices they make. So if we look here, this is a 2-channel input device with XLR. Inputs are something that when we speak inputs and outputs, What we're really talking about is from Dante's perspective. So as an input adapter, this is taking analog output and inputting it, becoming a transmitter on the Dante network. So we have that for inputs, and we have that also for outputs. So what this means now is that I can actually bring devices, hardware devices, my mixing console. So if I wanted to stream something out of my mixer over a Dante network, it could be a traditional 15-year-old Dante mixer. I have the ability using these types of interfaces to bring even those older devices, older powered speakers into sort of the Dante world. So we had this where we played this before, and I was using the Behringer here as a device. So now, if I wanted to instead use the output adapter, so this would be the audio that's coming out of the Dante network, and I plug this into the powered speaker instead, and I plug the Ethernet cable into here. On Dante Controller, what you should see here, let's see if I got it all here. Yes, okay. So this is all done sort of live, which is always great. I have here the input device that's coming in. So now this speaker is available to any other Dante-based audio device that's on the network. And so if I go back, let me just sort of move this here again, see if I can do this. I want to set the, there we go. We'll send the same audio now from Chrome into the speaker. And now this is, so that's now all happening to a totally different device. And this is cool for a couple of big reasons. Let me shut this off here. The first is that I was able to set this entire thing up in front of you in 20 seconds. Just took this, plugged it in. It appeared in Dante Controller, plugged it into the cable on the back of the powered speaker, and did the mapping. We were up and running in effectively 30 seconds start to finish. Hugely powerful having that sort of flexibility. And these are the things, I mean, we keep talking about being prepared in a professional context. These are the types of things people will throw stuff at you that you never thought you'd have to do, was never really part of any plan you had in advance. Having these types of adapters and using Dante sort of as a general audio infrastructure gives you that type of flexibility. The other thing is these devices, they come in mono and stereo. So the mono devices are $99 and the stereo are $125, $130 list price. So these are things that you could typically, in a professional context, afford to have a couple of them in your bag of tricks and pull them out when you need it. But having the flexibility from the Dante side overall is the other piece to this equation. It saves you a lot. And if you think about, even from a cost side, and as we talk about video production, we tend to get into the nuts and bolts, but all the time that you have to spend in setup, in teardown, all the money you have to spend shipping gear, and all the time you spend getting things debugged and working, that's all an expense. So having technology, even technology that has a price, it's not free technology, and it's not radically cheap. Even though the software and the hardware, all those pieces are these dongles and the software we showed. I mean, the software has a bundle between Soundcard and VIA are probably $60, and these as I just mentioned are under $130. These types of devices now can pay for themselves. Less weight. I mean, I'm sending a switch and a Ethernet cable versus a big heavy snake. And in terms of setup and teardown time, can make a big cost difference. So it's something, even if you work on a fairly small budget, if you need to do things in multiple venues or with multiple changing requirements, it could be very cost effective to take a look at working with these kind of devices. And our entire production studio here, we are all Dante Audio now. So outside of a few things that we have sort of in a local rack talking to the mixer, everything routes here through Dante. So I am speaking from personal experience in this. This is something that we have found to be really incredibly useful for us. So that's our show for today. So hopefully all of you found it useful and interesting. We didn't have any questions come up today, but I would certainly, if there's any questions that you may have, say you're not watching this live, please feel free to just put that in the comments here, or come to the Streaming Alchemy group on Facebook, and you can start a discussion there. And love to go into detail about any of the things we talked about here today. Jeff, thank you. Jeffrey Fitzgerald just popped in and said hello. I'm grateful, Jeff, to have you here. I will post that. He's asking if we could post a list of all the products shown. I definitely will do that. This is something that I'll post the list, post links, and I'll also make sure that I add a little more detail in the comments as well about this, so everybody knows what what these actually are, and how, if they want to buy it, to make sure they get the right ones for their productions. So thank you again, everyone, for today's show. I think we've covered everything. There's a lot of depth in Dante, so there may be future shows that will go in more detail about the networking side and the infrastructure side. But for our next show, we're actually going to do our first remote interview. This will be with Floris Perro from Holographics. I got to meet Floris at NAB this year. He is one of the brains behind Holographics, and a really clever and impressive product that they offer. So we'll go into all of that next week. So thank you again for joining. And until then, have a good one. Take care.